What's up, fam? It's your favorite storyteller, Matt D. Talford, author of the award-winning book From Fear to Faith, A Survivor Story, as well as Captain's Mate and Stuck in an Elevator. Today's quick video is a lesson in history and how nations fall, okay? Now, this isn't in no way, shape, or form an allusion to the United States or anything like that, no, because we're an active nation. And even though with all the unrest that's going on right now, this is not the subject of this video. This video is talking to my brothers and sisters who are descendants of African slaves, okay? And I say that loosely, okay? And you're about to find out why. Here we go. So, how do nations fall? Every nation that has ever fallen has fallen due to military defeat. In other words, an enemy came in and defeated that nation, and that was pretty much the end of that nation. They took over. They, enslaved or killed all of the fighters, enslaved or killed the population, or exiled them, got them off their land, and took it over or whatever. That's how nations fall. That's how nations become lessons in history. Now, how does that apply to the so-called black man in America or African American, whatever? How does that apply? Well, unbeknownst to many so-called Afro-Americans, the black man in this country, once upon a time, did have his own country, okay? That country fell due to military conquest. But I think what is more important is how. When's the last time the so-called African American had his own country? It was about 1,950 years ago. With this year being 2020, if you were to subtract 1,950, what year you left with? 70 AD. 70 AD is a very significant year in world history. Why? Because the mighty walls of Jerusalem fell in 70 AD. Jerusalem, where? Capital city of the kingdom then known as Judea, located in Northeast Africa. It was not called the Middle East then. There was no such thing as the Middle East. Okay, the Middle East is a European nomenclature. It's a European nomenclature for Northeast Africa. There are many reasons why it's not called Northeast Africa and it's called the Middle East. I'm not gonna get into those right now because I don't feel like getting political. This is a history lesson. So, the so-called black man, the so-called African American, lost his homeland due to military conquest in 70 AD. Who defeated him in 70 AD? The Romans. 3 Roman legions surrounded the walls of Jerusalem, and it took them 5 months to do so, but they broke through and they destroyed the city of Jerusalem, destroyed the temple built by a king, well, the second temple it was, as it were, and pretty much massacred the inhabitants or drove them out into exile and enslaved the ones that they didn't kill or drive out. That's what happened, okay? That's the last time the so-called black man, aka African American, had his own country. Now, I think what is more important is how that military conquest basically came to that end. I'm going to use one word: infighting. Infighting is what caused it. So if you don't know the history, you can look this stuff up. It's in books. It's also in a number of documentary videos on YouTube and other places. Infighting. You had 2 major factions among the Hebrews, aka Judeans, aka Yahudim, because there was no letter J in the Hebrew language. 2 major factions. If you know the history and what was going on at that time in their country was colonized by the Romans. They had a deal with them to become a Roman protectorate, and the Romans said, okay, we won't attack you, we'll make sure nobody else attacks you as long as you pay us tribute, which is known in modern terms as taxes. Now, so the 2 major factions, well, there were, and I apologize for the sunlight, guys, I can't do much about it. Again, that might help. It's just that time of day. Anyway, 2 major factions. One of them, getting back to the colonizer thing. So you had those who were in favor of the Roman colonization / occupation / the protectorate deal and paying taxes. And then the other faction, you had those that were not favorable. They were not in favor of it. They wanted to return to being an autonomous nation. They didn't want any Roman, governance or anything like that. And so these two factions in 66 AD, an event happened where the one that was not sympathetic to the Roman colonization went into Rome and burned up a whole bunch of stuff. Burned up agreements, burned up documents, killed some people, burned down some houses, that sort of thing, burned up some buildings. Okay? Roman emperor responded by saying, hey, we need to let them feel our might and let them know that we don't play. So he sent his armies into Judea to burn up and basically retaliate. All right? So, as a result of this retaliation, there was this back and forth fighting. Now, interestingly enough, during the Roman now invasion of the land of Judah, those two warring factions continued fighting each other. And when I say fighting, I mean this was a full-blown civil war where they were killing each other. All right? They were killing each other. So, in killing each other, they were constantly weakening their own force strength. All right? So by the time the Romans pushed their way to Jerusalem, they started in the north and attacked the south and just burned up everything in their path and took whatever food, provisions they wanted and burned up and killed people as they made their way south toward the capital. What happened when they got to the capital? Well, they laid siege to it. Now, interestingly enough, as history books say it, or as history tells it, there was enough food within the walls of Jerusalem for its inhabitants to withstand a 2-year siege. But because of the infighting, these two factions burned up each other's grain stores. The one grain store controlled, or the food stores, grain stores controlled by the Roman sympathizers, was burned up by the group that history calls the religious zealots. The zealots went and burned up the sympathizers' food. The sympathizers retaliated and burned up the zealots' food. So by the time the Romans attacked, they had no food. And they did what smart people would do. They recognized that they had a common enemy and they stopped fighting each other to focus on the Romans. But as you know, combat back in those days, there were no guns. I mean, all of the weapons were manual. You either used swords, spears, arrows, or slings. All of these required strength and calories to wield these weapons effectively, okay? When you got no food, you got no calories, you can't fight. So that is pretty much that lesson in history. That is how they lost. They pretty much they ran out of food, and when you lose food, and now they still had a will to fight, okay, and they fought valiantly, and I mean there were a couple. There was one occasion where they nearly captured the general, and that would have been the end of the battle right there. They nearly captured him, and were it not for his reserve cavalry seeing what happened and flying in to rescue him on their horses, that would have been a complete annihilation near the beginning of the siege of Jerusalem, and that would have they nearly repelled the Roman invasion. But these things were prophesied to happen if you read scripture, if you understand it. The Messiah told his disciples, he said, when you see Jerusalem encompassed about by armies, flee to the mountains. So he told them this was going to happen in advance. He said, when you see Jerusalem encompassed by armies, he basically told them the future. And so it was going to happen. It had to happen. It was prophesied. So we know that this is getting a little bit into spirituality, whatever. But we know that the Judeans were the last of the Israelites to live in their homeland. The northern kingdom had left after the Assyrian occupation, the Assyrian capture and enslavement. And once the Assyrians released them, they never returned to their homeland. That's some disputed history, but the history, as the Bible calls it, says it, puts them in the land of Arzareth. Now, where the land of Ozark is disputed as well, but many people generally recognize it as the Americas, and that's kind of where you got the Aboriginal Native Americans, if you will, from. The original ones were not from Asia. They were the 10 northern tribes. But anyway, I'm not going to get into that right now. Just wanted to give you that history of how kingdoms fall. Kingdoms fall via military conquest, and the last time that the so-called African American had his own country or his own nation, his own land, was 1,950 years ago. And of course, I mean, you know, the prophecy, and I did a separate video on this on my YouTube channel, guys, that titled Deuteronomy 28 and Leviticus 26, a study of history, not theology. That's the title of it. And it pretty much goes into detail about this being prophesied, and being prophesied as a punishment for turning their back on the God of their salvation, the Most High. All right. So it was prophesied to happen. It was going to happen anyway because they had turned their back on him. But it happened. When you want to get into the nuts and bolts or the X's and O's of how they lost, the infighting is what cost them. So why do I bring that up? Simple. We know the saying, those who do not learn from history are doomed to repeat it. And among the descendants of those people that lost their homeland due to infighting, well, ultimately due to disobedience and turning their back on God, but mechanically speaking, you know, with regards to the X's and O's of combat, the infighting diminished their force strength. There's a lot of infighting going on today with regards to politics and, you know, that sort of thing. And usually it's, again, politics of infighting about politics. So just wanted to share that with you guys. Just something to think about as you're going about your business. Today is Sunday. Anyway, today is June the 7th, 2020. Sorry, long day, and I'm low on calories. I need to eat myself. But anyway, guys, I'm going to let you guys, hopefully you guys will have a great week. And just wanted to share that bit of history with you all. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you like it, give it a thumbs up. And please subscribe if you haven't done so already. And anyway, I didn't say that this was Maddie's Rap in the beginning, but for Maddie's Rap, this show where we rap about things that guys rap about when we're hanging out. This is Author Matt D. Talford, and this is a wrap.